Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome to another Land Effects webinar. My name is JR, and I work in the Client Success and Manufacturer Connection departments here at Land Effects. Joining us all the way from Australia, right in the middle of his night, actually, is Sam Milani from Greywater Reuse Systems, and he is here to discuss Greywater reuse in domestic and commercial application. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping reminders. First of all, the webinar is being recorded, which will be uploaded later on today for you to fall back on. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A button down at the bottom there, and we would be happy to pass those questions along to Sam. As always, the chat box is there and is a great place for any comments, banter, or to chat amongst yourselves. And lastly, if you are viewing this in full screen and want to exit out, if you head toward the top there, you should see an exit full screen or escape option. With all of that said, I'd love to now turn this over to Sam. Thanks so much, Sam, for joining us.
Thank you, JR. Hope you're all well. So yes, I'll give you a little bit a small presentation on basically Greywater domestic and commercial application. What I'll cover today is facing the worldwide water and energy challenge, why Greywater reuse, Greywater diversion versus Greywater treatment, what we have learned in the last 19 years in Australia, because we've been at it for a little bit longer than you are. We've had droughts since the beginning of the century. So beginning actually 2000, we had the millennium, we called it the millennium drought. Then I'll talk about domestic applications. And there are two types. They're the ones that we separate them in two types, a two-stage install and then the plug and plays. And then the commercial applications, decentralized, centralized, and the different levels of treatment. I'll finish with the Greywater, some information on Greywater irrigation, especially for domestic applications. Now, facing the worldwide water and energy challenge, you faced it, you're facing it right now with the drought and heat and fires. In 2002, there was a US National Clean Water Act, and one of the heroes of this act basically said that the fastest way to save energy is to save water. And why? Because water has a very high footprint when it travels. And so if you can save water, you will reduce the greenhouse gas emissions quite fast. Now, with the population growth and global warming, we have less fresh water, and we have actually more wastewater. So reusing water is a no-brainer as far as we're concerned. Now, I'm going to try to go over why Greywater reuse. Okay, now the environmental reasons, it's a chance to reduce your water consumption, number one. Because you're reusing the water twice, so you're paying for it once and you're reusing it twice. Fighting desertification and minimizing fire. This has been shown in Australia that actually, if your garden is green, your chances of fire are minimized. They're not eliminated, but they're less because your gardens are green, and during droughts you're often not able to irrigate. Reducing greenhouse gas emission, that's another. Reducing fertilizer using garden. Yes, Greywater does have a little bit of nutrients, which helps reduce the fertilizer, the amount of fertilizer you use in the gardens. Reducing groundwater pollution by improving ATU and septic performance. One of our biggest export is New Zealand, and one of the reasons, it's not because they're in drought, but it's because they want to protect their groundwater. They've done studies showing that actually, if you reduce the gray water input into your septic or into your aerobic treatment plants, then you tend to have better water quality coming into the ground. And then planting and irrigating trees to cool the planet. That's also something we've experienced in Morocco, where we're trying to plant more trees, reducing gray water. Other reasons, it's another chance to recycle and reuse water a second time. Now, most people recycle paper, they recycle cans, they recycle bottles. But one thing that we don't tend to recycle is water. Now, saving water supply cost, I mean, yes, sometimes depending on the cost of water, it can be minimal, but when you don't have water, that's important. Keeping garden lush during water restrictions and fire events. I don't know how much of fire restrictions and fire events you have, but that's the only water that you'll be able to use. And saving water disposal cost. Sometimes you've got camp out there and you have to truck out the water. We've encountered also some of these applications, but the most important is for most home, it's the only water you can use during droughts. So, of course, if you're on bore or you're on wells, you can use the water, but in general, most homes don't have access to these. And so the only water you can use during droughts to water your gardens is gray water. Yeah, I'd like to make a differentiation. In Australia, we are quite clear, and I think in the US also, there is a clear distinction between greywater diversion and greywater treatment. Greywater diversion is water comes in and goes out into the garden. Okay, you don't store it, you don't hold it, you filter it, and you pump it out, or it goes through gravity. And usually the best way to actually distribute the water is, as far as we're concerned, drip irrigation. In Australia, mulch basins, things like that are not seen very favorably. They're actually not allowed in some states. And the reason is that there's been some bad applications. Greywater treatment, it's really mostly, I mean, you can use it in domestic, although it's not very, very, very economical in domestic applications. So most of our greywater treatments are for commercial applications. But first step is we divert it, and usually we divert it at source, so I'll explain that, and then we treat it, and then we can store the water and supply it to target irrigation or non-potable use like toilet flush, laundry, car washes. This is a little table summarizing what are the standards in Australia. Greywater diversion, these devices are, we call them GDDs, and they're up to 1,000 liters a day. You cannot store the water more than 24 hours. It's got to meet a certain plumbing standard. The water quality is not defined, and it can only be irrigated using substrata drip irrigation. As for GTS, greywater treatment systems, they're basically you can use it everywhere if you want. So domestic and commercial application, you have unlimited daily flow. You can also store it as long as you want, but it does need to meet 3 different levels. Level 3, which is for drip irrigation. Level 2 is for all irrigation like sprinkler irrigation and toilet flushing, and level 1, which is a little more advanced, and it's for all non-potable water use, so like laundry reuse. So you can see, yes, when you compare to the US, actually you only have one standard for GTS, and the Greywater diversion is very similar to our applications. Now, this is to illustrate Greywater diversion at home. So if you see, you've got the home generating water, the black water and kitchen is going to the toilets. The gray water from the shower, from the basin and laundry is actually going through, is being diverted. There is, I mean, the standard is to have an overflow. So if the pump, if there is no power, if the pump fails or the filter block, then the water needs to be able to go back to the overflow, to the sewer or to the septic. But if you look at the different systems, then they are all diversion system, and then they irrigate subsurface strip. Now, this is an illustration of gray water treatment we do. So gray water treatment is very similar, except that there is one more stage. Usually you capture the water again below ground or at the lowest level, and then you divert it into a treatment system. And then depending on the treatment system, you can drip irrigate it. If you go to level 3, you can spray irrigate, or you can use it for non-potable toilet flush and laundry. Okay, now I'm gonna try to cover some of the things we've learned in Australia. So we're going to give you all the secrets we've found in Australia for the last 19 years, because we've been at it since 2004. First, working with small buffers. So that's a buffer tank. So this is something that often when we start, we encounter people want to put the biggest tank possible, and then they install these large tanks, you know, how many, 300 gallons or 400 gallons tank, and then it ends up smelling. The larger your tank, the more smell you'll get. So really, with gray water diversion, since you first can't store the water more than 24 hours, there's no point having a big tank anyway. So water can go in and come out. Your real storage is your soil. Also, we found that actually with gray water diversion, we only use vortex pumps, because gray water diversion, the water quality is quite poor. And as you know, closed impeller pumps give you very short life with poor water quality. So using vortex pumps are important. I'll talk about the 2-stage installs for new homes on slabs, and also the plug and play retrofit systems for tiny homes or for homes on stumps. Or we also, when we go on the ground, usually we use a reflux valve or a non-return valve in the plumbing, so that the sewer cannot go back into the gray water system. As far as gray water irrigation is concerned, I'll explain that at the end, but really it's a whole balance, and we've been using a certain type of trippers and drip line that are very large passages, because otherwise you end up clogging the drip line, and you can burn the pumps and things like that. So one of the things also we've learned is that the plumbers don't have concepts on how to install drip, and so it's important for the people who are installing drip to have a understanding on drip irrigation. Rotor valves, we don't use solenoid valves because again, they're not they're not suited to dirty water. We use rotor valve. We have pre-filters. We don't use post filters. Again, we've learned that the hard way. People don't clean their filters, so you end up with clogged filters, and then you've got again burn pump or problems with the pump. We developed, of course, and patented the self-cleaning system, which we're exporting right now in the US. And really, the self-cleaning is the key to commercial application. Really, water restrictions, government incentive, and cost of water are the biggest drivers of greywater reuse. Now, I'm just going to talk about, actually, I see there is a chat. Somebody's asking a question, but maybe I can wait. I'll have to read it later. Okay. New homes on slabs. So generally, when you're building a house on slab, your greywater will be coming out underground. So what we've learned is that really we need to capture it underground, of course, and it's at source. And so we need to have a pit, basically, where we can access the unit, the greywater. The way we do with new homes on slabs is that we have a two-stage install. It's usually when you build a house on slab, you do the plumbing about 6 months or maybe a little less or maybe a little more before you erect the house. And that's the time while you're doing the plumbing, the best thing to do is to install what we call a builder's kit, the access pit. Stage 2 is later on, really when you, what we call finishing kit, when you finish the house. So when you put in the pump, the irrigation, and then you can actually then select your irrigation, and this irrigation and the pump size should match. All right, so this is the way we do it in Australia. Really, all new homes, we have what we call access pits or builders kits. And when the builders call us, or a lot of the builders specify, just install access pit or a builder's kit. And the house is then greywater ready. And the only thing you need to do, no more plumbing, it's all underground, it's all covered. Then you can just drop a pump and actually pump into the garden the water, or you can pump it into a treatment system and treat the water. But it means you have access. The problem is you don't do that initially while you're building the house, then you really don't have access to your greywater for future. And I mean, we all building homes for 50 years at least. And so it's not a bad idea to put, they're just about $1,000 to $2,000 access pits that you can connect to the plumbing, and then you've got your house greywater ready. Now, why getting the house greywater ready? Again, it's very similar to why we should have a greywater. I mean, we are the driest continent on Earth, of course. Drought and water restrictions are becoming more severe and frequent. Greywater is the only water that can be reused in times of drought. Watering garden and flushing toilet with drinking water is not sustainable. Keeping plants alive and garden green is essential to stopping desertification, reducing the impacts of fires, cooling the ambient temperature, combating climate change. A gray flow access pit is cheap and easy to install at building stage, but virtually impossible or very expensive once the house is built. A house with Greywater access pit has a higher resale value in Australia. Reusing Greywater for watering gardens and trees will become the norm in the near future, we believe so. Also, we know that technology improves all the time, so having that access to Greywater may mean something in the future for people who want to treat the water. Right now, systems are a little expensive, but yes, in the future, they'd probably be a lot cheaper. So yeah, gray flow access pits give you instant and easy access to your gray water. Now, that was for the new homes on slabs. Now, generally, tiny homes, caravan park, retrofits, really require what we call above ground or partially buried plug and play diversion systems. So these are plug and play, so they're not two-stage. We install them with a pump and everything all in there, and yeah, you just connect them to power and they'll start. So we have also developed a series of domestic grease traps for for the tiny home market. We do have a large tiny home market here in Australia and New Zealand, actually. This is some of the, I'm going to just show you some of the plug and play applications. So this is when your water is available at shallow. It's again, if you look at the thing, this is all drip irrigation. Again, in Australia, we do use a lot of drip for grey water because that's the standard. Yeah, we have different sizes of systems. We have the Greyflow PS and the Greyflow Pro, which is for different really square yard areas, garden areas. That's for large gardens. The Greyflow Pro, the one before was Greyflow PS. You can see an installation here. It's all underground. This is with the self-cleaning mechanism. So it backwashes automatically at the source. So it throws the water back to sewer when the gray water comes in. And yeah, to clean the water. And we use only compressed air to backflush the filter. So we don't use water. We've done a lot of tests, and the best way to backflush the filters is with compressed air. So this is for bigger systems. So the Greyflow Pro, that's an installation. You can see flush, you don't see anything. It's all on the ground. And the drip is put in on the ground, and then it's mulched over. In Australia, usually you should use about 100 millimeter or 4 inches of mulch. I believe the US is about 2 inches. Now, these are the Greyflow diversion versus the Greyflow treatment. The US standard is NSF, and it compares to what we call level 2 in Australia, Australian standard 1546.4 level 2. Now with Greyflow, the Greyflow diversion systems, first of all, we have no storage tanks and small buffer tanks. We have pre-filtration, so we filter before the pump. We never filter after the pump. We filter always before the pump. So we filter, it's not under pressure, the filter is on gravity. And so they're quite large. They're about 10 inches filter, and sometimes we have 2 in series, which increase the filtration area. Yeah, we can have several systems diverting into a treatment system, and the backflush is the patented system that we have for the diversion. So the backflush is on the diversion. We do have backflush also, automatic backflush on the treatment system, but that I'll explain later. Now I'm just going to show you a few applications. This is a decentralized greywater diversion system. There was about 350 homes. They're little retirement villages. And what we do is, and also some mining camps, what we do is we take the greywater from each house and we divert. So it's really decentralized. We use them also on dongas and accommodation in resorts. We've done a few projects like this. This is the one in a mining camp. So if you can see, pretty desertic, 50 degrees outside, Celsius, sorry. So it's over 120, I think, degrees Fahrenheit. And yeah, we were using the shower water to green up the camp. You can see this is when we installed it. This is later on, and this is after a few years. And all this vegetation basically cools the camp. Also, the owners get rebate on their sewer fees because they are not throwing the water to sewer. They are actually reusing the water to irrigate. Again, this was the little lifestyle village. And you can see the amount of water that we can save with 350 homes, 17 million liters a year. How many it will be divided by 4 in gallons? So about 4 million gallons a year or something like that, 4 or 5 million gallons a year. Centralized treatment system. This we've done in caravan parks, in surf life saving clubs, office buildings. What we do is we pick up the water and we pump it into a centralized place. First of all, we divert it from underground to a centralized place, and then we treat it, we store it, and then we reuse it. Now, this is really, this one is mostly for gardens, so reusing it in gardens. However, you can, I mean, this was a surf life saving club, sorry, I'll show you this one. This was in Coogee in WA. These are for buildings. So they're, you know, we use car park location, and then we put tanks there and we water, we capture shower water, laundry water, and then we can irrigate the gardens around the building. You don't need to have a bore or a well to irrigate, or using town water to irrigate the area, which means that you can keep it green during droughts where water restrictions are there. Sometimes the water restrictions can be quite tough. Oops. Yeah, this is actually a caravan park. We use that because their aerobic treatment plants was not performing properly by diverting the gray water from the common showers, because all the showers is in one place, and irrigating across. We were able to actually restore the performance of the aerobic treatment unit, because they had it's not on sewer, so it's on a treatment system, and so the water quality came back to what it needed to be. The problem with gray water, it's got a lot of soap and it kills bacteria. So the aerobic treatment plants, which are based on aerobic treatment and bacteria growth, they get a shock when they get too much gray water and they don't perform properly. So by just removing the gray water, we find that actually the treatment plant, this is why in New Zealand we do sell a lot more systems, because of the environmental impact that it has by just removing the soapy water, which has very little nutrients. However, the septic water, the black water, has a lot of nutrients, but the septic tanks and the ATUs, first, they get less loading. Second, they've got more retention time to do the job they need to do. So we find that actually by removing the gray water, they do perform very well, much better. Okay, these are centralized treatment systems for apartment building, for resorts, or if you want to reuse for toilet flush, yeah, or municipalities, you know, generally, or if people want to sprinkle the water, not drip the water, we need to meet the same as the NSF standard, which is a 10, 10, 10, 10 TSS, 10 BOD, and 10 E. coli. This is a little palletized unit that actually treats the water to that standard. And these are containerized systems that we built. They go on site, they go into mining camps, and they basically treat the water to a certain level in order to be able to reuse it for flushing toilets. I'm just going to cover a little bit. I'm going to try to finish a little early so I can have more time for questions, because I know that usually there are quite a lot of questions. But I'm going to try to finish and give you a little understanding of the drip irrigation versus mulch basins and things like that. So with drip irrigation, your water is spread a lot better. So you can, but there are restrictions also. So in Australia, for example, you cannot be close. The building, you've got setbacks from buildings, you've got setbacks from fences. You cannot do your verges. You cannot water your verges. You can only water what's in your inside your property. And depending whether the soil is gravel or loamy, you can apply a certain amount. So we usually help people size their gray water irrigation based on the type of soil they have and everything. Now, we don't usually test the soil, but a rough information from the site will give us approximately what type of soil they have, and then we'll say, okay, this is the amount of square meterage that you need to cover. Also, the setbacks from the homes are 0.5 meter, so about half a yard. From boundary, it's about a third of a yard, so it's not a lot, and that's for the drip system. In terms of the drip system we use first of all, the filters we use, the pre-filters we use are what we call down to 400 micron or 40 mesh. Okay, we don't go smaller, because once we get smaller, it's a lot more maintenance. We've been testing that for quite some time, and we found that actually that's the optimum pre-filtration. Also, because we're using 400 micron filtration, really the drip line that we use has to be able to cater for that type of water. And we use, again, purple or lilac color as a standard, which is probably an international standard now. And yes, we irrigate through the drip line. We have what we call run length restrictions, like you can't run the drip line more than, but you can put as many as you want. You need feeder pipes, and the drip lines are turbulent flow path, and generally the inline drip line are the ones we prefer rather than the drip emitters. Drip emitters seem to have a very small inlet, whereas drip lines seem to have a very large inlet passage into the emitter, into the labyrinth, turbulent labyrinth, but and that's what we prefer, and we found that actually performance is much better. In terms of controlling stations, we don't use we use indexing valve. We don't use solenoid valves because the water at that level of treatment is actually quite dirty, and it'll block. The plunger on the solenoid valve will block. And we've tried quite a bit. You can use motorized valves if you want. They're a lot more expensive, but alternatively, we use what we call indexing valves. There are some that are made in the US, actually, K-Rain and the Fimco. But we found the ones that are a lot more, how can I say, more accurate are the volumetric ones, the ones we actually manufacture ourselves. First of all, they operate at very low pressure. Since we're using vortex pump, we don't have very high pressure on the systems, and then they can give us 6 stations, and they'll go from zone to zone. So there is 1 inlet and 6 outlets, and they'll go into different stations. Now, the key with the volumetric indexing valve is basically they'll give you a certain volume. Let's say you can set it up for 14 gallons. It'll give, per zone. So it'll give you, let's say you irrigate for, you give 7 gallons, and then the next day it'll continue, finish its 14 gallons before it moves into the next station. And it's a volumetric based one. You can, using different nozzles, we are able to actually make it turn at 28 gallons indexing. And it has 6 outlets. The things with these ones is you cannot blank the outlets. They have to be joined. So you can do 3 equal stations or 2 equal stations, but with 6 outlets. Oops. So yeah, this gives you a summary of the irrigation layout. And we believe that actually the irrigation is as important as the Greywater diversion itself. If your irrigation is not set up properly, your system will not. We've had enough experience in terms of longevity of the systems. When people don't put enough drip line, what happens is that the pumps suffer. When they don't have good feeder pipe size, there is too much head loss, and vortex pumps already don't give you so much head. So you tend to lose a lot of the head you already have, and the drip line operate at very, very low pressure. Yeah, we usually recommend, again, we have our 400 micron filtration. We have 1 inch at least from the diverter, a feeder pipe to the garden. That's at the domestic level, of course. When we get to commercial, it's different. And also when we go to treatment is different, because once we treat the water, we use all type of drip line. You can use solenoid valves. You can, but with Greywater diversion, we do not use the water quality is not good enough. Maximum run length 7 to 10 yards. Yeah, we recommend to use all the 100 yards of drip line per station, and the multiple station, we use only hydraulic valve. Balancing the irrigation on sloping area, we use spring-loaded check valves and non-return valves, and to keep the main line primed. Otherwise, you end up at a domestic level. You end up emptying all the line, and every time you pump into it, it may not actually go very far. That's about it, JR. I think I've covered all I wanted to say. So I'm a little early, 5 minutes, but I'm happy to have questions.
Perfect. Well, we do have one that came into the chat. Actually, we have a couple in the chat, and I feel
Yeah.
like it's probably gonna take a little bit of time to answer. So just gonna read it out
Yeah.
real quick. No doubt the reuse of gray water has great potential, but to make it more effective, it must be applied on multi-story buildings or big projects. It is difficult to convince clients for the reuse of gray water. They don't want to spend the extra money on the setup. What will be, and this is part one of the question, so what will be the most effective way to convince the client? And then part two is, can you show any cost comparison study of gray water systems? And then Shabir also had a third part of that, which is what is approximate warranty of the system if used as per the recommendations?
Yeah. Okay. Look, I'll try to answer the first question. Look, definitely when you look at buildings, they're the biggest users. So when you look at my presentation, you will see in terms of millions of liters reuse, the commercial is by far the biggest one. Also, they can afford the treatment, the general maintenance and everything like that. So that's why you can reuse treatment. You use treatment in the building industry. Now, in the US, NSF standard requires 10-10-10, and that's a high level of treatment for irrigation, as far as I'm concerned, and meaning that you're gonna have to, yes, pay a lot more to treat the water. So not only the infrastructure cost, but the running cost is higher. That's why probably in Australia, the approach is different. To reuse it in gardens, they've actually they have what they call level 3, which is 30-20-10, and you can use it with drip line. And we find that that is quite popular because it's a lot more economical than getting 10-10-10 water. So, and for the infrastructure and for the maintenance also. How to convince people? I think eventually the drought will convince people. People are going to have to change. Yeah, I don't know how to. I can tell you it's been a big challenge. People don't want to spend the money, but as water increases. Now, one thing in Australia is that you can get reduced sewer fees. You know, when you pay a bill, a water bill, part of it is sewer and part of it is water consumption. Now, if the sewer bill assumes that 95% of the water goes to sewer, so you pay for the 95%. Now, in commercial applications, not in domestic, but in domestic application in Australia, it doesn't make a difference. You can't get a rebate on the sewer fees, but in commercial application you can, and that may be something that can give it can be an incentive for people to actually reuse the water in the building. Okay, in terms of the warranties, we give, okay, the way we work in Australia, and it's been actually quite successful, and we've learned the hard way, is that we have what we call an accredited installer program. We train people, because really the most important part is not the installation of the plumbing, the system itself. That's pretty straightforward. Any plumber can do it. But the irrigation side, because we're stuck with the gray water with drip irrigation, we do need to have a trained irrigation installer, and that's what we do have. So the stage 2 generally, or drip line, when we do plug and play systems, they're installed by what we call accredited installers. Now, when an accredited installer installed the drip system, then we give 2 years warranty on the system. That's what it is. If the person decides to install it himself, it's fine. But if they send us drawings and information on how they've installed the irrigation, then we will give them to your warranty. Otherwise, we don't. Because really the installation of the drip line is key to the life of the system. Any other questions I can answer?
Yeah, we do have a couple more. So first coming from Jacob, he says, have you seen an increase in wear on irrigation equipment such as the valves, the spray rotor heads, etc., from using gray water opposed to traditional clean water? And second part of that is there any special maintenance required to removing residues and keeping the system working well?
Yes, okay, yeah, perfect. Yeah, as far as we're concerned, yes, the irrigation equipment, like the valves, we use the rotor valves, so they're pretty free flowing. So we don't, you know, they'll handle the water. We don't usually have problems with maintaining them. The drip line, we believe that they should really be flushed at least once a year or once every 2 years minimum. A lot of our clients don't do anything, but and will run for 5, 6 years, and then they'll call us and they'll say, oh, the drip line is blocked. They never flush the drip line, and the way we usually recommend for installation is to do. Now, also working with the accredited installer program is that the accredited installer offer his service once a year service fee. They're usually not very expensive, $120, $150. He goes on site, he flushes the drip line, he washes the tanks, you know, the small tanks that we have, and washes the float switches. And I mean, generally we have systems that are about, what, 14, 15 years old. They call us and they say, oh, the pump has gone now, whatever. So we yeah. There is a life. If you use the fresh water, you probably have a much longer life on the equipment for sure.
Awesome. So Jeff had kind of a couple things. He said that he really liked your presentation. He said it's definitely going to be needed in the future, particularly in the Southwest. In the late 1990s, there was a couple of resorts in Tucson, Arizona, using it, particularly Ventana Canyon for the golf course. So that was really cool. But he did have a question, which is, are there any health concerns with these types of systems? And do you run into any issues with the cleaning chemicals getting into the systems themselves?
Okay, I'll try to answer the water. Look, in general, water quality, of course, is a lot thing. So we use pumps that are a lot, you know, they have special seals and things like that. So the pumps we use on our Greywater systems are special pumps. They made specially for us with special seals because there's a lot of chlorine and things like that in Greywater. Now, this is what we've noticed in Australia. Okay, when we started in 2003, the Millennium Drought, 2004, the government legislated Greywater, so people were able to use Greywater. Now, those days, a lot of the soaps were not environmentally friendly, so-called. Okay, a lot of people were using high salt detergents. Like the powders and the hard soaps had high salt level, also high phosphorus, and wasn't so good for the plants. Now, what we found is actually with water restrictions, that whole changed. So and Greywater. Now, because a lot of Greywater was sold in Australia at those days during the water restriction, because you had no choice, you had to water your plants. Your 100-year-old tree is dying if you're not watering it. Now, you know, if you so people were bucketing the water, or they were using Greywater systems, but they had to water their plant to keep them alive. And Of course, when you use when you use the gray water in your own garden, you're a lot more aware of what you're putting in there, and also a lot more careful. So a lot of today, if you look at the Australian detergent market, you will see that 90% of the soaps are what they call gray water friendly. So low phosphorus, low salt, and they all have that little sign that says low, you know. So that's I don't know if that answers your question. What else?
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking off of that,
Yeah.
coming from the chat, is kind of wondering how the alkaline and acidity quality of gray water gets fixed. Is the filtering enough for that purpose?
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. The filter really, in gray water diversion, the water is not treated, and the acidity, depending on what you use. So really, it the onus is on the person who uses the soaps. They have to use environmentally friendly soaps, and soaps that don't give that are not too acids for the plant. But look, we've been 19 years in business, and we have not had not one complaint about plant quality. That's all plant
That's great.
and problem. And I think sometimes, you know, we've got display homes where we've got people like the Great Gardens, Chris Ferreira, that talks on radio and think about gray water. And when he installed that system 15 years ago, gray water diversion, people told him, oh, it's not good for the Australian natives, you will die, they will die and everything. And oh, it's been 15 years, and every time people come to his house, he said, look, all these plants, it's very lush garden. He says they've never seen normal water. They've only been irrigated with gray water. So, of course, he is careful on what he's putting into his, you know, he's using. And it means that people use, again, the best results we've seen is on trees, fruit trees. They're amazing, you know, the results, the amount of fruits it gives. And yeah, it's, yeah, we haven't seen any bad effect on plants for the 19 years. We haven't had any complaints. So that's all I can tell you.
Yeah, great. Next question is, how do the valves work? Since there's no controller, are they manually operated?
No, they're hydraulically operated. They're like a water meter. They spin. And as they spin, the wheel spins inside because of the water. So water goes through it, and then it spins like a water meter. And then it shifts from one zone to another. Okay, so it goes from one zone, and then it discharges, let's say, 28 gallons, and then it moves to the next one. And then it charges 28 gallons. And if it stops halfway through, it'll keep, or let's say 14 gallons, or it will wait there until the next time, and then the next time it'll continue, maybe 7 gallons, and then another 7 gallons, and then it will shift to the next one. So they're hydraulically operated, and yeah, they're pretty simple, and generally very large passage, so they don't need high maintenance. I think probably after 10 years, like the drip line, we recommend after 10 years, you could probably replace it, especially if you haven't flushed it regularly. But yes, it does have a shorter life compared to town water.
Gotcha. Well, that is, looks like all the questions that we have at the moment. So I really, I thank you for your time. I know it's in the middle of the night there, and we really appreciate you joining us once again. It was nice seeing you back in October in Australia, in your neck of the woods. So we appreciate you joining us virtually over here. I know you went on a little tour of Europe not too long ago. So we really appreciate you putting this together and all the time that you spent with us and answering questions.
Sure. No problem. Well, look, we are we have established a distributorship in the US, and we are working at this right now because we believe it's a thing. Also Europe, and we're exporting to South America and Chile. We're exporting to New Zealand, and yeah, and I think that our diversion system is usually the first step. Treatment system will come. There are many people that are producing treatment systems. They can be quite expensive. Yeah, we'll be promoting our system also all over the thing. The problem often is getting the standards, like a treatment system, passing the standard here. Each country needs to pass its own standard, and they cost a fortune to, to pass the standards for each place. So that's why it's taking quite some time.
Well, we look forward to the future and seeing GreyFlow grow even more than it already has over the last couple decades. And once again, thank you again so much for joining us. And thank you everyone for joining our webinar and listening in on Sam's presentation on Greywater systems. We hope everyone has a great day, and we can, yeah, go ahead.
One more thing, JR, just want to explain also the fact that the Greywater market has been a roller coaster. Okay, it hasn't been a flat thing. When there is droughts, everybody wants Greywater. When there is no drought, nobody talks about it. So, and that's actually quite difficult to sustain, you know, for a company when you produce. That is why one of the reasons we are actually spreading our wings over, because there is always some part of the world that is dry. Okay. So we can survive that way. Otherwise, for example, the last few years in east coast of Australia, we had floods and floods and floods during summer, and nobody was interested in Greywater reuse. Okay, so that's one of the issues with Greywater. People tend to forget quickly the drought when there is rain. But again, we promote getting the house at least Greywater ready, so that when the drought comes, you have access to your Greywater. You have another source that you can reuse. Okay, that's Absolutely. It. Sorry about that, and thanks
no, you're good. Yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate you again, and all the the wealth of knowledge you provided, and we hope that you have a great rest of your weekend. I know it's Saturday over there right now, and rest of the weekend for everyone here. So thank you, Sam, so much. Have a good day, everyone.
Have a good day. Bye. Thank
you.
Bye-bye. Bye.